everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Northland Outdoors podcast. I'm Chad Koel. Welcome along on another great adventure. You know, speaking of adventures, there are so many great adventures in our Northland Outdoors. So many wonderful, wonderful stories. One of the guys that we have counted on for more than 3 decades to keep us apprised of all the news and all of the great human interest stories out there in our outdoors and all the activities is Brad Dokken of the Grand Forks Herald. Grand Forks Herald outdoor editor Brad Dokken is our guest today, and it's going to be just a fantastic discussion about his career as a journalist and some of the great stories that he has covered in our Northland Outdoors over the years. But before we get to that, a quick reminder, if you don't want to miss any of these Northland Outdoors podcasts, and I know you don't, make sure you go to inforum.com and subscribe. Costs you next to nothing and gives you the key to information across our entire Northland Outdoors. One subscription gets you access to all 30, almost 40 newspaper titles that they have and all sorts of other stuff, including Northland Outdoors. And you don't want to miss a minute. So make sure you get to inforum.com and subscribe. And also, don't forget to tune in each and every Sunday night after the 10 o'clock news for the latest episode of Northland Outdoors Television. We're right in the middle of the season right now. Some absolutely fantastic adventures going on there. So every Sunday night, right after the 10 o'clock news, all across the North Dakota ABC network and on KSFL for those of you down in South Dakota and Sioux Falls. So that's Northland Outdoors TV. Make sure that you check it out. Now, without further ado, let's talk outdoor journalism with Grand Forks Herald outdoor editor Brad Dokken. He's been sharing the stories of the outdoors in the Red River Valley and beyond for more than 3 decades. He is easily the undisputed authority on outdoor news in our part of the world. Brad Dokken of the Grand Forks Herald joins us today. Brad, thanks so much for being on the Northland Outdoors podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's start at the beginning. You've been doing this a really, really long time, writing about and telling the stories of the outdoors. How in the world did you find yourself in this line of work?
It was really kind of a matter of being in the right place at the right time. I graduated from Bemidji State with a degree in journalism, but never really, went into it with the goal that I was going to be an outdoor writer. It was just something that when I started with the Herald Company here in 1995 or 1985, I should say. Boy, I'm really dating myself. Our boss, Mike Jacobs, always had a real focus on the outdoors as being kind of an important part of our newspaper's coverage, and it was sort of a team effort back in those days in terms of people sharing the outdoors and doing stories on the outdoors, and it became a full-time position in later years, I guess about 1995, and then the previous outdoors editor became the managing editor in 1998, and the job opened up, and I applied for it and got it. So yes, been doing it ever since.
You're no stranger to both this part of the world and the outdoors. Obviously, growing up in Roseau, correct? So correct. I mean, that's right in the heart of it. So maybe it's a stupid question, but why the interest in the outdoors for you? What is it about? Is it a way of life? What is it about the outdoors that drew you to that particular profession?
Well, I think growing up in that part of the world, it's just such a ingrained part of life. I mean, most people up there are, they're fishermen or hunters or, ATV riders or, snowmobilers. And, it was just part of the lifestyle. And my dad worked for the DNR up there at Roseau River Wildlife Area. And so, we were pretty much an outdoors family as I was growing up. And it's, like I say, a way of life. And I still spend as much time up there as I possibly can.
Over this 35 or so years that you've been covering the outdoors, I'm assuming you've seen a lot of different changes in things, not only what we do, but how we do it. I mean, is that true?
Oh, incredible. Yeah. I mean, when I first started, my first job was actually in Wadena, Minnesota, and I started with a typewriter. And you'd hand off the copy to a typesetter who would enter it in, and then the pages were pasted up by hand. And boy, if I had to go back to writing with a typewriter, I think it would be really, really tough. Compare that to where we are now. And I've been working remotely since the pandemic hit in March of 2020, and I don't feel disconnected at all. I mean, everything that we can do, in the office, I can do remotely. And I don't think there's ever been any time, probably in the history of the profession, where there's been more changes than what there's been in these past 3+ decades.
No kidding. And that also applies to the subject that you're covering, the outdoors, hunting and fishing, and the days of the guys with the plaid shirts on out, and that kind of stuff. The sports, the outdoors really has changed a lot, hasn't it? Our understanding of it, especially.
Absolutely. It's incredible. I mean, the green box was already, around, I guess, when I was on the scene, and I guess I was probably in Grand Forks here before I ever bought my first electronics. But I mean, you look at GPS and underwater cameras, and of course forward facing sonar, which is an absolute game changer these days, and side imaging. I mean, what technology can do right now is incredible. And I guess with that comes the responsibility of being good stewards at the same time, because those fish do have a little bit of a less chance now than they used to back in the day.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that that's the kind of culture surrounding the outdoors has changed as it should along? You mentioned being good stewards. It seems to me like we have a better grip on that than we did even 30, 35 years ago when you and I were starting out in this game.
I would agree completely. Yeah, absolutely. People are a lot more conscientious, I think, of their actions out there. A case in point would be, lake sturgeon, which of course are doing very well in Rainy River Lake of the Woods and here on the Red River in the Red River Basin. But I mean, used to see people, photos of people holding these fish up by the gill plates, and vertically, and which of course, in a lot of cases, if it's a big fish, it's probably going to kill it. And you just don't see those kinds of things anymore. And that's just one example, but I'd like to think that some of the regulations like they put in this past winter in Minnesota to littering violations and things like that are hopefully getting better. But I think people just take what they're doing a lot more seriously. That's what I've seen, I think, in a lot of cases anyway.
Yeah, and partnerships with government have changed a lot. You look at an organization like MinFish and what those guys are doing. Those guys are doing with relationships with the legislature. And then one of the recent articles that you wrote about the oh God, you're going to have to help me now. I know I should have wrote it down, but the department in North Dakota that they just formed for outdoor recreation support.
Right.
Yeah,
the office of recreation. Yep.
Right. I mean, those things, not that long ago, probably would have got laughed off the floor. But I think people understand the seriousness of it now.
Well, and the economic impact of the outdoors is becoming much more apparent. And I mean, this is in a lot of small towns, especially. It's a real economic driver, and there's opportunities, I think, with these offices to sort of partner up, the outdoors and draw in, private business at the same time. So, it's going to be interesting to see how things work out with that office and where it's headed down the road.
So you've covered a lot of stuff over the years. Hate to put you on the spot, but what are some of the biggest stories you think you've ever covered as far as the outdoors are concerned? Most important, maybe.
Right. Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones and the most significant ones, and there's a couple of them that really stand out to me, but the first one would be the walleye recovery on Red Lake. I remember going over there in the winter of 1999, where the town of Waskish looked like a ghost town. I mean, there was nobody out there. Everything was closed up. There was nobody on the ice. And I mean, it was a really gloomy scenario. And then I think it was later that winter, people found those crappies, and at the same time, a bunch of different players, the Minnesota DNR, the Red Lake Nation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and others got together and said, let's do something to fix this, and embarked on a really aggressive stocking program. And I think it worked better than anybody could have even imagined that it was going to work, because I mean, they started restocking in 1999, or it might have been 2000. I can't remember now, but within a matter of 6-7 years, they had reopened both sides of the lake to walleye fishing, which is an incredible comeback and just a really great story. And another one that really stands out is here on the Red River, just the effort to what they call reconnecting the red, and by removing low-head dams and replacing them with fish passage structures. They still function as dams, but they're a lot safer. And the effort to restore sturgeon populations here in the Red River Basin, which has been yielding just some amazing results here in the past couple of years, especially. In fact, I have a story running. It's already on our website, but it's going to be in the paper on Saturday about a woman from Grand Forks here who caught a 56-inch sturgeon right in town here on Saturday during the women's fishing event. Just amazing, gorgeous fish, and totally unexpected. But these kinds of things are becoming more common.
Yeah, I saw the photo. We'll throw it up here for people to look at. Yeah, amazing. And it's a really interesting story, too. The sturgeon did what sturgeon do and came all the way out of the water while she was fighting it. So that'll get your attention. You don't see a lot of leaping catfish usually. So, no, that's amazing. Yeah, it's an amazing story, that particular fish. And the Red River itself, Brad, I'm a guy, too, that spent a good portion of my adult life living in Minnesota, working in Fargo, and drive across that river twice a day. And you'd look at it and, it's this brown thing down there, and you just kind of ignore it. And we've come to realize, it's an amazing resource, not only as for recreation, but as a fishery. I don't think even today yet people still understand how good a fishery the Red River really is.
It's an incredible fishery. And, when I first moved to Grand Forks, kind of the idea of catching a catfish was like, ooh, you grow up on Lake of the Woods, right. It's walleye, and in many other places as well, so kind of turned up my nose at it. But that changed once I caught a couple, because in terms of just sheer power, I know you've been out with Brad Durek at least once.
Yep.
And at times of year, and I'd probably get in trouble from some folks for saying this, but at certain times of the year, the walleye fishing out there can be pretty good too. And you just never know what you're going to catch. And that's the beauty of a river, I think. In fact, the biggest walleye I've ever caught in my life, I caught on the Red Lake River, basically in East Grand Forks city limits. And I mean, I've had the opportunity to fish all over, many places in Canada and different areas. And I have yet to top that fish. It was, like I say, 31.5 inches. And I don't know if I'll ever top it. I mean, it kind of keeps you coming back, but the bar is set pretty high.
Yeah. And the nice part about it, too, is it's so accessible. You can sit on the bank and catch those fish on the river. So, yeah, you're right. It's a great resource, and it's nice to see that more and more people are using it. What, as far as like other kind of storylines, challenges, concerns, there's always kind of something going on, but what are some of the bigger ones that are kind of floating around out there now that you see going on, and when it relates to the outdoors?
I think one of the big
AIS and things.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the big ones is, chronic wasting disease and, efforts to kind of, slow the spread of that. And, in North Dakota, of course, Minnesota's outlawed baiting for deer hunting, for as long as I can remember. But in North Dakota, what they've done is, hunting units that have chronic wasting disease or are within 25 miles of an area with chronic wasting disease, they have implemented a ban on baiting. And of course, that's been a little bit of a culture shift for some people where, baiting has been kind of an accepted practice for years. And so, there's been some controversy about that, but, just trying to stop the spread of that, because it seems like once CWD is out there, it's pretty hard to eradicate it. And it's the implications, I think, are kind of scary. So, that's that's definitely a big one.
What about like I mentioned before, the invasive species stuff? I mean, that's another one, that just keeps coming and coming and coming. What are your thoughts on that particular issue? And do you think that, are we fighting a losing battle there in your mind? I mean, I know you've spoken to a lot of people about this over the years, different times.
Well, I'd like to, once it's there, it seems like it's there to stay, but, hopefully more people are following kind of the clean, drain, and dry and doing their part to try to mitigate the spread. I know when they first started talking about AIS or ANS, as they call it here in North Dakota,
right.
I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I thought, well, that's something that's going on somewhere else. But, it starts hitting closer and closer to home. And of course, the Red River here is just absolutely loaded with zebra mussels. You pull up on, when the river starts dropping, you'll see rocks along the river are just covered with them. And a couple of summers ago, they actually retrieved a car out of the river here. Brad Durek had found it on his side imaging, driving through an area in downtown Grand Forks. There was a car at the bottom of the river. And, they got the sheriff's department out there, the water rescue team, to get the car out. And when they pulled it out of the river, it was absolutely covered with zebra mussels. I bet you the steering wheel had zebra mussels that thick all the way around it. And I think that might have been one of the reasons it was so easy for him to spot on side imaging, because it had so many zebra mussels. But that really drove home the point to me of just how extensive that problem is. I don't know that it's affected fishing at all at this point. I think maybe there's more of an issue with, like the sharp shells of those things cutting the lines, things like that. But
right.
It's certainly not going to clear up the river because it's silt that's contributing what's going on there. But yeah, AIS is a scary thing, and it does seem like people are doing a better job of following the rules to try to mitigate the the spread, even if they don't necessarily like some of them.
Yeah, I think it's one of those deals too, personally, that it's an unknown, it has been. And the more we learn about it, I think we get to a point where, like you mentioned, the Red River, but the fishery still seems to be good. Mille Lacs and the problems that go on there, but not necessarily related to the zebra mussels per se. It's one of those deals where the more we learn, I think the more we, I guess, maybe end up learning how to live with some of these things, but also to keep them from spreading as much as possible. Do you have all these years, do you have a favorite story, person, character in the outdoors that you may have met along the way?
There was a character by the name of George Gardner from Grand Forks here for years. I can't remember. I think he owned a lumber company, but there's a group from Grand Forks here called the Grand Forks Builders and Traders. And every year they organize a trip up to the Ontario side of Lake of the Woods. They go every year Memorial Day weekend. So they're probably on their way up there right now, actually. But for years and years and years, he was the organizer of this trip. And even into his 90s. And several years ago, I'd have to think back pretty hard how many that is now, but they invited me to go along on the trip and do a story on him just because of how many years he had been doing that trip. And so I went along and I had a chance to fish with him the one day. And I mean, he was using just an old, I can't remember if it was a push button reel or just a real old school level wind reel, but he outfished me. And he got about a 26-inch walleye at the end of the day, late in the afternoon of kind of the Saturday, the last day of the trip. And he goes, well, that's good. I'm done. And he just reeled up and sat there and enjoyed the surroundings. Well, later that winter, he passed away. And the next year, I went back up there again, and they had a ceremony. They sprinkled some of his ashes on an island up there where the crew always had shore lunch every year. It was kind of a favorite spot of his. And we got done with lunch and headed back out. It was raining a little bit, but wouldn't you know it, within minutes, his son reeled in a 10-pound walleye within sight of that island. It was just one of those magical things that make you think, wow, there's something bigger at work here.
Yeah.
But he was a true character. I think he was 94 years old, but still going strong, and drove up there all by himself. Even into his 90s.
Doing it this many years, does it ever get old for you? I mean, we just talked before we got started really here. You're saying it's deadline day today, and this is the life of a journalist, and you've been doing it a long time, but it seems to me like you're still enjoying it.
It is. I mean, it's a fun beat. In terms of covering journalism, I'm sure you would agree in your situation. There's just no 2 days are the same. It can be what you make it in a lot of cases, but it's the people that you meet and the places you get to go and some of the opportunities that pop up as a result of that that make the job worthwhile. In terms of other people, memorable people, it's hard to single anybody out. There's just been so many over the years. I've been really fortunate to be a part of that and sharing their stories.
Yeah, that's definitely the way it works. One of the questions that I often get, if I'm visiting with folks, is what if you have any advice for people that want to get into this. And so I'm going to ask you that question. Do you have any advice for younger folks who want to get into the business of journalism, of writing in particular, which, I don't know how you feel about it, but it seems to me is becoming kind of a lost art with the way digitally we do things these days.
It has definitely become a lost art. And I don't know that there's very many, newspaper outdoor writers left out there anymore. I can only think of a handful off the top of my head. And as far as I know, I'm the only one in North Dakota that works for a newspaper that is still doing this. But, knowing how to write and being versatile in a lot of different aspects, whether it's, photography, digital video, the more and of course, having a certain proficiency, in the outdoors and some ability to know how to hunt and fish and things like that, I think are, that's a real key as well. But another important part is just being a good listener and, listening to people, sharing their stories and taking note of your surroundings. But it's, it can be a challenging business, but it's very rewarding as well.
So let me ask you this: you hear golf pros say, complain they never play golf, or people that are in the business don't get to actually do it. What's on yours? You've been out fishing? Been out doing anything?
I have, yeah. Been catfishing a couple of times with Brad Durek here a couple of weeks ago when he was sort of pre-fishing for his guiding season, and we had just an excellent afternoon. He'd already been fishing for a few hours when I hopped in the boat with him, but I think from about 1:30 to 6:30 that Sunday afternoon, I think we boated 27 cats up to just over 20 pounds, and we weren't more than a few miles from the boat ramp here in Grand Forks. So that was just a beautiful day and a great time out there. I went, and this was a whole new thing for me. I got invited from a guy in Grand Forks and his son to go paddle fishing out in western North Dakota here in early May. And that was a whole new thing for me. I'd never done that before. I didn't end up getting one myself. The two folks from Grand Forks I was with, they each got one right away the first morning we were there. So it was fun just to kind of see that. And then their father from Bismarck, who's 80 years old, met up with them as well. So it's, I got to kind of jump in on a family tradition there, which was, kind of a neat and a real privilege. He and I did not fill our paddlefish tags, but I think I'll have to go back and give it another shot. It's a lot of work. I mean, anybody that thinks fishing is not good exercise should try paddle fishing sometime.
Well, I tell you what, let's put that on the. Go ahead.
I was going to say you can't do it all day. You've got to, I would last about 15 minutes and then I'd have to take a little break and go at it. I was kind of wishing I would have been one of the ones to get that fish in the first couple hours, and then I could just sit and watch everybody else. A lot of fun.
Well, I was gonna say, let's put that on the Northland Outdoors TV schedule. I'm gonna go out and film Dokken snagging a paddlefish next year, and we'll do a TV show on it. It'll be great.
Have you ever been out there for that?
No, I have not. I have not. And that's always been on the list too for me to do. So
It is an
I'd like to do
absolute
that. That'd be fun.
it's an absolute spectacle. It was really cool to see, and to think that these fish that can get to be over 100 pounds live on nothing but plankton and other critters that you can barely see. It's they look like they would be kind of a mean aggressive fish, but they're just these big gentle giants cruising around out there. But neat part of the world, very very different from here in the valley. So that was a lot of fun. I was up at Lake of the Woods for the Minnesota opener, and we had good luck up there. So that get together with some friends, and I didn't write about it. I know some papers always do cover the opener. It's always been kind of my tradition. That's my day, my time. So, but
right.
A good time was had. Always fun to get up there.
Yeah, and that's like the paddlefish, like the lake sturgeon. There's just a couple more of those. We did a show on the lake sturgeon, over on Lake of the Woods this spring. Caught some beautiful big fish, and and you mentioned the catfish too. People have always kind of thought, maybe not so great about catfish, but these species that are just. I mean, where else can you go catch a 70-pound fish? And they're dinosaurs. That's the other thing is paddlefish and sturgeon are fish that date back to the dinosaur times. It's amazing, so many different opportunities. So anything big coming up on the horizon that you can let out of the bag or you want people to know about?
Well, let's see. What do we have coming up here? I'm going having a couple more Canadian trips coming up, going up to Lake of the Prairies in Western Manitoba with a Canadian friend again in mid-June. Did that last year. Absolutely loved it. A friend of his, so it's kind of a friend of a friend deal, has a cabin up there. It's a reservoir on the Assiniboine River, basically right on the Manitoba-Saskatchewan border. But we had just fabulous walleye fishing up there. Going on a flying trip out of Nestor Falls in August. So again, these aren't necessarily work related. Sometimes there's kind of a fine line between work and play, but when you make trips like that, even if they're kind of personal trips, you usually end up getting something out of it. So those are a couple of things I got coming up.
Well, when you're an outdoor writer, it's what I tell. So I teach a couple classes for young kids on video production. And what I tell them is if you can somehow figure out a way to make your passion your work, you never have to work. So it's a great way to be.
I'm curious. I'm going to turn the tables here a little bit and ask you a question. How is YouTube? How is YouTube? And there's so many YouTube fishermen out there and some really great shows. How is YouTube implemented or not implemented but affected? The way you do things.
Oh, absolutely. No question about it. Yeah, it's completely different, than even 20 years ago, as far as distribution goes of what kind of stuff that we do, that everything comes into your house on one cable now or one wire. And so a YouTube channel is right there, one click away on your remote as WDAY or any of the broadcast TV stations. So it really has created tremendous opportunity for lots and lots of folks. There's no question about it. But, it all boils down to the same thing is getting the word out about what you're doing. And so people can find it, and that's the trick. So yes, it's changed considerably, much as your industry has too, with the going away from the paper and going to digital stuff. So yeah, we've all had to adjust, and it's been interesting. And actually, it's challenging, but I think there's even more possibilities now than there was before. But when it comes to the outdoors, you still got to catch the fish.
You do, yeah, and sometimes when you have that camera in your hand, that can be they're the
worst.
Yeah, so that's like
ask Brad Durek.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
well, I tell you what, I know you. Go ahead.
He doesn't have too many bad days out there, but they occasionally happen. He says.
No, he doesn't. And we had a great show with him this last year, so I can't wait to get back up there and do it again. Listen, I know you're a super busy dude and you got deadlines to get to and so on, so we're going to let you go, but I really appreciate you sharing, your story with us. I know people have read your name and read your work for many, many years, so it's always fun to get to know the guy behind the byline a little bit. And keep up the great stuff. We love reading every word of it.
Well, thanks. And that goes the same for you. And if you're ever up this way again, make sure you touch base. It'd be fun to wet a line and maybe visit a little bit in person.
We'll do it. Brad Dokken, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Nobody does it much better than Brad Dokken, and he's been doing it for 35 plus years, sharing the stories of our Northland Outdoors with all of us, and we really appreciate him taking the time to share some of those stories with us today. Now, before we go, make sure you get over to inforum.com and sign up and subscribe and get all of the great information that is there, including everything Northland Outdoors. And don't forget, Sunday night, after the 10 o'clock news on the North Dakota ABC network, WDAY, WDAZ, and all of the ABC stations across the state. Also, KSFL TV down in Sioux Falls. Make sure you tune in for the latest episode of Northland Outdoors Television, and we will see you there, and we will see you on the next Northland Outdoors podcast.